Hello, everyone. A very good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for joining the Youth Consultative Meeting, the first ever in-person youth preparatory meeting ahead to the WEG process, the Science Policy Panel, to contribute further to the sound management of chemicals and waste and to prevent pollution. It's a very great pleasure to welcome you all, for those who are joining us in person, also virtual, for this crucial meeting. As a starting point, we would go through the agenda very quickly with you, and it's a very great opportunity to start with thanking UNEP for giving us this platform and for their continuous support. So thank you so much. I'll go through with you for the agenda very quickly. We will start with opening of the meeting. We we'll follow after that with a brief scene setting where we go through the WIG process and some sort of an introduction about what's going to happen and what's happened before as well. We have updates from key chemicals, waste, and pollution related processes. And these policy processes are very crucial to complement the WEG process, as well as understanding what's happening on the other aspects in avenue related to our focus on chemicals, waste, and pollution is very crucial. So we have updates from the ICCM 5 and SICM. We have updates from BRS convention. We have updates from Minamata, UNEP nitrogen working group, and then we have also updates from Vienna Convention and Montreal Protocol. And lastly, we'll have the INC process updates on the plastic treaty. So it's very crucial, not only for the capacity building, but it's also a good opportunity to see the policy process and where are we at the moment. After that, we will go to a very quick overview about the Route to UNEA 6 and the draft resolutions, the potential resolutions to be adopted, and with the ones that are related to the chemicals, waste, and pollution. We will review the official documents prepared by the Secretariat for the WEG process, including the INF documents and then the working documents, and we will try to explain the differences and highlights more into how to find them, how to read them. And it's very crucial for those who are joining the process for their first time to not get lost during the contact group, because during the negotiations there was a lot of mentioning about referring to document UNEP/SPB/WEG/INF1/2/3. So I was like, people might get lost in the middle. So how to find these documents and how to know where are they referring to. Also, it's a good opportunity and platform to prepare interventions and also bring proposals to the table if some of our demands are not addressed, or we feel that it could be even improved in a better way. After that, we'll have the chance to brainstorm and finalize the youth demands for the process. We will go through the scope of the different contact groups, and we will try to some sort of brainstorm and go through the documents. Later on, we'll have other matters, and then the international dialogue. And for those who are joining online, if you have any question or if you want to participate and get into the session, it's very open and you're welcome to raise your hand and join the conversation. Yeah, it's a pity that we couldn't get as much youth as possible on the ground, but luckily we have this, the integrated hybrid format. So once again, very welcome. And I hope that everyone can stay with us and bear with us. It's kind of a long meeting, but at the intergenerational dialogue, it's very crucial for you to be present and for you also to ask questions. It's we had the honor to get the speakers for our intergenerational dialogue, including the chair herself, and we have the principal coordinator, and we have other potential guest speaker who are working in the process. And it's a very good opportunity to showcase the youth engagement, also to highlight how we can ensure a future policy that is inclusive, including the youth in the process. After that, we have the closing of the meeting. The intergenerational dialogue gonna start at 4:30 Nairobi time, which means around 4 hours or less from now. We will have a stop after 50 minutes from now, around 1 p.m. to have a lunch break and also networking session. And then, yeah, we will close the meeting. So to start with, first, let me introduce Zuhair, the global focal point of the Children Youth Major Group, to open the meeting, also to some sort of giving an introduction about the CYMG.
Yeah, thank you, Asil. It's always a pleasure to talk to my fellow constituents and then share updates. And as you already mentioned, that this is the first time we are mobilizing youth online and in person, though we don't have a huge number in person, because as you can see, there's obviously a limitation in budgetary resources, accreditations and all. But hopefully we're about to get more participants in coming hours. But yeah, we have a lot of people online joining us who are also the member of the Chemicals and Waste Youth working group, chemical waste and pollution working group. So yeah, welcome to the first ever Youth Consultative Meeting on the WEG process. And we're really grateful to the Secretariat, UNEP Secretariat, and then the chair and the Bureau for this approval of hosting and providing logistical supports. Yes, this is kind of has become a practice. It is like kind of, reciting verses from Bible, like when you start any event, like also talk about the constituency. So as you know, the Children Youth Meji Group is the constituency, the UNEP mandated constituency for the United Nations Environment Program. And this is a huge constituency with more than 5,000 individuals, individual members, and more than 600 youth organizations who are the constituents of the constituency. And we have so far 17 working groups, and chemicals, waste, and pollution working group is one of them. We have a lot of other working groups. We're not going to be very, in detail that in this meeting, but yeah, you can always find that in our website and in our WhatsApp groups and everywhere. So welcome to the meeting. The constituency is very happy to have all of you support from UNEP. The staffs we have, they're providing continuous support here on ground, Maria and Katerina. Yeah, for their kind support to be with us. And yes, we look forward to have a very successful Youth Consultative Meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zuhair. All right, and now we will move forward for agenda item 2, the brief scene setting. In this agenda item, we will be covering 5 subtopics. We will start with Union Resolution 5/8. Yeah, I'm moving it now. Seems okay. So yeah, we will talk about the Resolution 5/8 very briefly, and then we will have an introduction to the existing science policy panels and their operating principles, and why are they needed, and especially we will move forward for the need for a science policy panel on this specific matter, the chemicals, waste, and pollution prevention. We'll talk about the SPP process, what happened briefly in 1.1 and 1.2, and the outcomes of the previous intersessional works, including CYMG submissions and our work in that session. So very briefly, UNEA and Resolution 5/8, where UNEA is the United Nations Environment Assembly, and it's somehow the governing assembly for the environmental related topics. It's the highest decision-making mechanism when it comes to the environment. And during UNEA 5, we had a lot of resolutions out of the assembly, and one of them were 5/8, and that one specific one is where this process came from. And as you can see, it's as I mentioned, highest level decision-making body. It has a universal membership of all 193 member states. They meet biannually, and the upcoming one, UNEA 6, is in end of February to going through March 28 until 2nd of March. And then firstly, it was formalized in 2014, preceded by the Governing Council of UNEP, which was initially composed of 58 member states. Major group got formalized, recognized as the civil society engagement mechanism following the Rule 70 in the UNEA process and its subsidiary bodies. And the children and youth major group is one of the formal mechanisms, engagements to the process out of 9 other major groups. So this is some sort of a very brief overview for those who are new to this process. 5/8 was focusing more. The decision came with the content of a science policy panel that it should be establishing to contribute further to the sound management of chemicals and waste and to prevent pollution. And you might hear 5/8 sometime during the process. So that is the reference that got this working group the mandate to start negotiating and start implementing the science policy panel. So what are the existing science policy panel? Why the science policy interface is important, and what are the operating principles? I would now invite my colleague Olga to, which she is the science policy interface facilitators in the Children and Youth Major Group, to go us through this existing panels and the role of the science policy interface. The mic is yours.
Thank you everyone for joining us today, and it's my pleasure to tell a bit more about existing science policy panels and especially about our submission on the operating principles of the upcoming panel. So the first question that you might ask yourself is, why do we need this science policy panel and why is it important? So we need this science policy panel to undertake horizon scanning of issues that are relevant to policymakers, and at the same time that can propose evidence-based options to chemicals and waste and pollution. This science policy panel would also be able to conduct assessments of current issues and identify potential evidence-based options. This science policy panel will also be able to provide up-to-date and relevant information and also identify key gaps in scientific research. But what is most importantly, and what has already been kind of stressed today in informal consultation, is that this science policy panel will be able to facilitate information sharing specifically for developing countries and bridge the gap between all those NGOs and institutions that are based in the Global South. And while we were working on this process of establishing science policy panel, we also kind of identified key demands for us as young people. First of all, it's integrative approach to the panel so that the scope is to chemicals, waste, and pollution in all ecosystems: air, water, soil, and ocean, not like something exclusively to one particular area, but to all ecosystems. Then it is capacity building, and I think we are pleased to see in the preparatory documents for OEWG that capacity building is highlighted as one of the components to discuss. Then it's also important to focus on human rights and being gender responsive, as well as promote meaningful and inclusive engagement of young people. And finally, we also kind of asked for convening of multidisciplinary youth expert group. And I think my colleagues will be able to tell more how we envision that group and how we as young people can contribute to this science policy panel. But if we move to the next slide, we can see that we already within the broader system of UNEP have 4 science policy panels. And the recent one is IPBES. It's international. Asil, can you help me with intergovernmental panel on biodiversity and ecosystem? Yes. And it was established in 2012, and it focuses both on regional and global levels and identifies policy-relevant tools and methodologies that could help facilitate scientific research, and it builds on capacity and knowledge. The next science policy panel is IPCC, and I think with COP ongoing these days, everyone have heard about IPCC and its role in assessing scientific basis of climate change and how it is important to recognize science and bring that to international climate change negotiations. Then we have International Resource Panel. Unfortunately, as CYMG, we haven't engaged with this panel as much, but we are now trying to collaborate with them and look for some connections on how we can contribute to this resource panel as young people. And Zuhair has participated recently in their international meeting and established a connection that can provide a platform for us to contribute to their issues that they discuss on overconsumption, waste, and ecological harm. And then we have Global Environmental Outlook. It's kind of an analog to IPCC, and it's a consultative and participatory process to provide an independent assessment of the state of the environment. And this one is more inclusive to young people and engaging with us because, for example, ASEAL is a part of their youth expert group, and as well as alongside other young people and experts in different fields. And it doesn't matter if you are like an expert in science or social science, like in science, like biology, chemistry, engineering, or you are more an expert in social science. All your perspectives are welcomed, and you can participate in creating assessments on environmental challenges. And this is important for us to know how the science policy panels operate, because the best practices of these panels will be taken into consideration for these negotiations. And it's not only about copy-pasting the best principles, but also kind of assessing what works and what does not, and how to learn from existing science policy panels to enhance the work of the new one that we are currently negotiating. And that's why in June, if you go to the next slides, in June, as YCM, we prepared a submission on the operating principles of the future science policy panel. And here is kind of a short summary of the analysis that we conducted of what kind of principles are more important to one or another science policy. And we were trying to think what best practices we could bring to the new science policy while also providing new inputs. So for example, IPCC, they value a lot policy relevance, inclusivity, objectivity and neutrality, and credibility, as well as transparency. IPBES, they are more policy relevant. They acknowledge the role of indigenous and local knowledge, and also importance of geographic and regional representation, as well as they explicitly mention gender equity. Then for them, it's important to stay scientifically independent and provide comprehensive approach and peer review to all of their assessments. And they also stress complementarity, capacity building, interdisciplinarity, and transparency. For IRP, they value scientific knowledge, balance and diverse representation, objectivity, and robust methodologies. And last one is Global Environmental Outlook. They want to stay relevant to the needs of member states and stakeholders. And this is a very crucial principle that kind of implies that this science policy panel is flexible and they can adjust their priorities to the needs of member states. For example, when one issue arises, they would react to that and provide new assessments. Then it's balanced representation in respect to geography, gender, and discipline, being unbiased, evidence-based. And for them, it's important to be accessible and to also prepare outreach materials for stakeholders, civil society, and just generally to the audience, because it's important to use the language that's not only scientific, but the language that can also reach other people, wider audiences, because we do not want to be only like exclusive to this particular CYMG or the group of stakeholders, but also to reach out to local communities, to schools, so that they would be involved in the process. So basically, when we were brainstorming on what we would like to see in the new science policy panel, we took all those best practices, but we also added 4 more points. First is cost effectiveness, multi-stakeholderism, accountability, and comprehensive approach. And I think I would like to cover like multi-stakeholderism because it's important to take into account all the stakeholders that participate in the process. It shouldn't be, well, of course, UNEP is member states driven process. We do all acknowledge that, but it's also important to take into account all other stakeholders. And it's not only about all major groups that are currently involved in the process, but also those people who are currently not in the room, all those local communities and all those people who might suffer from chemicals, waste, and pollution. And also, it's also very interesting to note that the existing science policy panels, they do not talk about accountability. So how can we hold this panel accountable, and what can we think about their accountability mechanism so that it's not only about science and issuing what needs to be done, but also kind of tracking the implementation process. So that was very important for us. And we all welcome your feedback and whatever you think is important for operating principles of this science policy panel.
Thank you so much, Olga. And before we proceed, I just have some follow-up points. First of all, when it comes to the science policy interface, I would like to highlight that the role of youth is very crucial because these science policy panels are mainly focusing on, advising policymaking process, providing scientific evidence, providing scientific assessments. And here, very briefly, I would like to highlight the difference between global assessment and literature or research. So mainly, when we talk about global assessments, it's not new research. So it's more like utilizing existing literature and going through what we have already published from well-researched, peer-reviewed literatures and papers. So based on that, scientific authors and experts, they come together, they discuss the different perspectives and elements, and then they would provide more points that is policy relevance, that is advising governments to take certain action. When we try to simplify the WEG process or the future science policy panel, we always refer to IPCC because people listen it and it's somehow popular, but there are existing policies and we would hear them a lot during the course of the coming week. So very quickly, GU is the Global Environment Outlook. IRO is the IRP is the International Resource Panel. IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And then last is IPES, is Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. So we might hear them a lot because they will refer to them, they will refer to the operating principles, they will refer a lot during the course of the negotiation. So it's very important to know the differences.
So can I ask you a question? Yeah. So I noted that you are part of GR Youth Task Force, or like expert group. Can you elaborate on your experience and how we as young people, well, what is the selection process and how we can join that group?
Sure. All right. So when it comes to the GU7 case, what happened is that youth are getting the platform in the process of drafting the report and in the process of starting from the outline, the annotated outline, going through the drafting of the chapters, chapter by chapter. So the role of youth in that process is that we more like youth fellows to the report, and the role that fellows play is somehow we join the discussions of the experts and the authors. And to let you know, when I started, I was like, okay, we're gonna like be assessing the state of environment. Why do we need 3 years for that? Why IPCC takes 6-7 years to provide a certain assessment? But then the more you go to the process and the more you try to understand it, you will understand the complexity and how this process is getting different perspectives, and there are a lot of things to be addressed, and how such outcome reports or like the advice to the executive summary for the policy making, how can it be that much relevant and inclusive, and advising in a way that people can adopt and get inspired, start towards pathways to solve the existing challenges, either that climate change or biodiversity ecosystem or resources or environment, triple planetary crisis, and for the future chemical waste pollution. So yeah, the way you could get in was like an open call from the Secretariat to nominate youth fellows. There's an open call to nominate youth to the process to be like lead author or like contributing authors, or to be reviewers. We're gonna touch on that later on when it comes to how youth can engage. Try to highlight more on the existing panels, and this is also one thing to discuss, how in this during the intergenerational dialogue, how can we get, this is one of like the question that we need to exchange with the chair of the process, also with the principal coordinator from UNEP, and also from the participants. Before I touch on the needs and the intersessional work, I really want to highlight here that it's very crucial to get youth interested in the process, and I feel very proud to see the amount of people participating and also their affiliations. There are, I read in the chat, there are people who are like scientists, biologists, people who are doing research, people are doing practical work related to the chemicals waste pollution. So that was very interesting to see the growth of the interests as we go. When we started some of the intersessional work, people had kind of hesitation or lack of interest sometimes, or maybe some sort of the need to have the platform to discuss it more further, because the interest is there. But it's very great to have you all. If anyone have question, you can feel free to write it in the chat. Later on, we'll try to open the floor for somehow discussion. Also for people who are attending in the room, feel free to interrupt, and we can discuss. So as I mentioned, the need for a science policy panel, it's more into addressing the chemicals waste and pollution prevention in a way that scientific, one of the reasons I would say that's made us go through this process up until the negotiating future panel was that chemicals waste and pollution were not fully addressed in the existing outlooks and reports that is published by the existing panels. So it's very crucial issues. There are a lot of cross-cuttings related issues. So it was very much needed to have them. So now we have the floor and the platform during the coming week and during work 3 to more try to focus on the youth inclusion and young scientists inclusion in that process. Now, very quickly, we can go through the SPP process. So, yeah.
Well, around the mic. Thank you. Thanks again for giving me the flow. As you can see on the screen, this is the WEG process that we try to visualize and inform you. So it started from the UNEP 5.2 when the resolution 5/8 science policy panel to create a science policy panel by 2024 was negotiated, and then after that the resolution itself convened an open-ended working group, UNEP open-ended working group, which is now facilitating the negotiations to prepare the skeleton and the proposal for the future panel. So now, before this YCM in Nairobi, as you can see, we had several sessions. One is the first session took part in 2 parts. One is the first one took part in Nairobi on 6th October. That was kind of a starting of the WEG. And then we had the WEG 1.2 in Bangkok, where the Children Major Group was very much present there and presented their ideas and expectations. And between the WEG 1.2 and 2, we had a lot of intersessional works, significant intersessional works. One is that the WEG Secretariat asked for written submissions from the member states and the stakeholders, the major groups and stakeholders. We submitted so far 2 submissions. One was on the operating principle, and another one was the needs and question that the future panel may handle. Apart from that, there are more written submission opportunities were for the member states, to find out, to kind of take a stock of all the capacity building initiatives happening around the world on chemicals waste and pollution by different entities. Significantly, there are some regional meetings that took place in this intersessional period between 1.2 and the 2. And this took place in, as you can see on the screen, in 5 regions. Asia Pacific, which includes the West Asia as well, Africa, GRULAC is for the Latin American, the Caribbean region, EEG is the Eastern European group, and WEWG is the Western European and other groups. So that's mainly the Western Europe and the Northern America. So yes, so they had the regional meeting where they discussed about the regional priorities. They have a bit of consultations, even about their positions, common positions for the future panel. So that actually feed into the discussions of the YCM2, and all these submissions, all these discussions actually, get the form of working documents and information documents, which has been prepared by the YCM Secretariat and which is going to be negotiated and discussed in the next, in this very meeting. So yeah, we are here, YCM2. Though the negotiation, the formal negotiations will start on the 11th, but the consultation started from today. I mean, the 9th. Today we have the informal consultations of the member states, and we have the Youth Consultative Meeting. Tomorrow we have the major groups and stakeholders consultation and the regional meetings of member states. After YCM2, what will happen? Obviously, this is yet to be discussed by the WEG, open-ended working group. So guys, if you hear WEG, don't get confused. This is the open-ended working group that we're referring briefly. So as you can see in the screen, from YCM2 and YCM3, there'll be a, break of 6 months. And this, we might have a lot of, further intersessional works, like maybe the mandate will be created to have more written submission from member states and observers, stakeholders, different stakeholders. And then perhaps we can have a lot of webinars, capacity building sessions that we had during the previous intersessional work, the intersessional periods. So that's one thing. Yeah, the next meeting, the final, which is called the final so far. So the YCM3 will take place in Geneva, Switzerland. It's scheduled to take place unless it's changed. So that's going to be in Geneva. And then we hope that the proposal for the future science policy panel will be completely prepared and be agreed upon by the member states, and which will be kind of approved by an intergovernmental meeting. So as you know, that the WEG's mandate is to create the proposal, not to approve it. UNEA created the process, and one of the intergovernmental meeting where all the governments and the high-level officials will come together and then will adopt it. So that's called the intergovernmental meeting. Yes, this is yet to be decided, but that's completely depends on when we are going to finish the work of WEG. I think this is the simple timeline. And can we move on to the next slide? Yeah, so you might heard about bureau and secretariat, and it's a very basic thing. Sometimes we actually fail to understand the differences between the WEG bureau and the secretariat, but it's important to take note of. First of all, the bureau is kind of a political body where it comprises the representatives of the member states. For the WEG, the bureau, bring in the representatives of different regions. So they call the officers, they call it bureau officers. So from each 5 regions, we have Asia Pacific, Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, Eastern European group, and the Western European and other group. They have 2 from each region elected by their own member states. And then this bureau comprises 10 members, one of them a chair. Current chair is the chair of the bureau is the Netherlands, our respected Goody Alkamade from Netherlands, the DPR of Netherlands. And we have a rapporteur. Rapporteur is the Kenya, if I am not wrong. And the secretariat, the bureau is kind of a political body which kind of oversee the work of the entire open-ended working group. They meet mostly every month. or regularly and decide on the agenda and so many things. And then they consult with the broader member states group to decide on those things. Whereas the Secretariat provide the administrative services. This is the service provided by the UNEP. The Secretariat service is provided by the UNEP. It comprises the UNEP staffs who have the expertise on the subject matters and the administrative matters. So this is not some body to make decisions on. Rather, this body, the Secretariat, provides support to the WEG and the Bureau to facilitate the meetings and the works of the WEG, where they prepare the documents, collect the submissions, and then prepare the information document as per the demand of the open-ended working group. I hope that you understand the differences so that in future, when we'll have this, the terms, in the discussions, we'll not miss out any points. I hope that's all about the WEG SPP process. Hand over to you. So.
Thank you so much, Zohair. So, so far, if you have any question, those who are joining us in person or virtually, please feel free to raise your hand. We can take a couple of questions if there are any, and then we will proceed. So it's very crucial, once again, to differentiate between the Bureau, Secretariat, and WEG, SPP, and all that, acronym. And then we will go forward with the info document and all that. So to not get lost in between. So now I'll move to the second point, which is the outcomes of the previous sessions and intersessional works in terms of the CYMG and the children youth engagements. So one of the things to be highlighted is in the submissions, we refer to in the second one, and I'll go also through the first one very briefly as Olga has mentioned some of the operating principles that we demanded for, but to give you an overview about the needs that were addressed. And those points were derived from the youth demands and the statements and the submissions from the WEG 1.2 in Bangkok. So one of the elements were advocating and demanding for a multidisciplinary youth expert group to be somehow establishing within this future panel, advising, and also not only advising or like focusing, but also provide the scientific and getting the scientific youth, individual scientists, and getting youth that with social scientists, with early career professionals that are working within waste management and working on the ground with grassroots organizations and etc. So starting from that point, advising, informing, contributing to the future panel is very crucial point. And then we mentioned in terms of gender responsive and inclusive approach, and we highlighted the intergenerational balance. And that was also, as I'm gonna go through the regional meetings, with also we try to communicate it for the member states joining the regional meetings, for the representatives over these multiple regional meetings that took place. And it's also one of the points that we continue raising to be included in the panel. Broad scope and integration with other systems, capacity building, which is very crucial in terms of also the stakeholders engagement and the mechanism of the stakeholder engagement with the future panel. And then, the engagement. Last one was the international collaboration to address transboundary pollution and harmonize safety regulations on a global scale. That is one also of the needs that were communicated during this second submission. So the submission and the operating principles, there are already, both of them are already online. You can find them in the WEG official website. And the second one was on the operating principles governing the work of the science policy and the need and questions that the second one was in the need and questions. All right, so regional meetings. This time there was a regional meeting in the intersessional period from Bangkok till now. So we managed to get youth on the ground participating in the African regional meeting, Asia Pacific, GROLAC, and West Europe and other groups, and Eastern Europe group were taking place online virtually. So one of the aspects that were included during these regional meetings is that what we tried is to coordinate the youth interventions and to be aligned with the collective inputs that we got and we derived for the submissions. So we, in other words, we try to speak the same language in a regional context. Whether that was in Brasilia or in Nairobi or in Bangkok, we tried to demand same points, and that showed somehow the aspects of that the youth are self-organized, coordinated, even in terms of having the regional aspects into the meetings. We also had a couple of capacity building session. There was one focused more in the resolution and the WEG 1.1 and 1.2, and then we had the road to this process. They're uploaded in YouTube. Feel free to find them. There are a lot of more elaborated information in these two topics. Also, then there's something that I would like to highlight is that the Secretariat had put a lot of webinars and a lot of informations in existing webinars. They're focusing and addressing many different aspects of the work of the WEG process. One of them that we had the chance to join were the options of engagements and participation modalities for major groups and stakeholders to the WEG process. And that was taking place last September. But rather than this webinar, there are a lot of webinars addressing a lot of issues related to the process, a lot of capacity building sessions. Then you can get more information. And if you have the interest to learn more about, they're very informative with a lot of information. So as we move forward, we're a little bit delayed in the time, but as we move forward, we would have now the chance to listen to the updates from key chemicals, waste, and pollution related policy process. And it's very important to know what other policy processes are doing and where are we at these things and what happened. So we will be proudly happy to invite our colleagues from the Chemical Waste Youth Platform to join us and to brief us on the YCM and ICCM 5 BRS conventions, Minamata Convention, in terms of the youth engagements and to brief us more about what happened. After that, we would have UNEP Nitrogen Working Group updates, Vienna Convention and Montreal Protocol, and INC on plastic pollution. So we will be giving 10 minutes for the first part, where we would have our colleagues. I don't know if they are online.
Yes, we're online. Hello, everyone.
Amazing. Hi.
Okay, hello, everyone. Good morning. How nade? Karibu. Okay, so I'm going to be giving a brief on, I and my colleague, we're going to be giving a brief on ICCM 5, the BRS, and the Minamata COPs. And so you could just go down to the next slide, please. Okay, I can see the slide.
Yes, one moment. I'm opening them.
Okay. Okay, so before we do that, I'll just give a little background on the Chemical and Waste Youth platform. So next slide, please. Chemicals are very important in our lives today, especially in the modern world. But we know that there are some chemicals that are actually very harmful and toxic to human health. So we know that there are chemicals that are harmful and toxic to human health. And so if you ask yourself why chemical and waste governance is a youth priority, chemicals affect children and youth differently than it will affect adults, just the same way it affects women differently. So most times when we talk about youth priority in chemical and waste governance, We are not actually doing that because we want equal participation, because adults are participating in these things. So we also have equal participation per se. No, it's because there is actually a genuine concern on the effect of chemicals on youth and children, just as there is a genuine concern on chemicals on women, because biologically we are actually different groups of people, and chemicals affect us differently. Yes, so please, next slide, please. So talking about chemicals affecting children and youth, these conventions recognizes that various conventions now recognizes that youth are significantly vulnerable to. Then when you see the representation of young people in these processes, you see that they are not really being carried along or well. So this simple graph here just shows that most sectors that are participating in the in this waste chemicals and waste policies, the environmental sector is very much participating, the health industry sectors. Then for women and youth that are most affected by chemicals, you see that there is just little participation, just a little above 0%. So it's actually not so balanced. Next slide, please. And so due to this reason, the Chemical and Waste Youth Platform exists. So our goal is actually to engage youth in the design, the implementation, monitoring, follow-up and review of chemical and waste agenda policies at all levels. So the Chemical and Waste Youth Platform was started in February 2021. And from then to now, we have over 900 youth organizations and individuals in our membership. And this is from all parts of the world. And we have a very wonderful structure. So I happen to be the regional focal point for Africa in the Chemical and Waste Youth Platform. And my name is Stanley Alpara from Nigeria. So next we'll be talking about updates from other chemical conversion processes, and my colleague Ulysses is going to be helping me with that. Thank you very much. So Ulysses, if you could hear me.
I'm here. Can you guys see me or hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, because I cannot see anything, but I can see the slides, which is good. So my name is Ulises Bobadilla. I'm also part of the Chemicals and Waste Youth Platform. Oh yeah, there I can see now. I'm from the Chemicals and Waste Youth Platform. I'm actually like Stanley, regional focal point for Latin America and the Caribbean. And I'm gonna give you some updates on some of the international negotiations that that we've been taking part in. So next slide, please. Yeah, so first I'm gonna give you a little bit of background on each one of these fora, and then I'm gonna give you some updates for them. So we participated in YCM. YCM is the acronym for Strategic Approach to International Chemicals Management. This is a global initiative that consists of several participants from different sectors, and which makes it a multi-stakeholder approach with the objective to achieve sound management of chemicals throughout their life cycle by 2020. It is quite known for being a comprehensive instrument in the sense that it targets a wide range of chemicals and chemical groups, which differentiates it from other multilateral environmental agreements, which commonly target certain group of chemicals or specific chemicals. The International Conference on Chemicals Management is a body of YCM that oversees the implementation of YCM, that provides periodic reviews, that evaluates its implementation, and provides coherence and guidance across all the activities of the strategic approach to international chemicals management. As you can guess, the goal of achieving sound management of chemicals by 2020 was not achieved. And at some point, stakeholders decided to begin an intersessional process to prepare recommendations for a framework or for an instrument beyond the year of 2020. And here on the images, you can see some of the history from its from the beginning of the YCM to its to the last meeting, which was this year in September in Bonn, Germany, and also some of the history of the intersessional process. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as I said, the International Chemicals Conference on the International Conference on Chemicals Management is a body that oversees the implementation of YCM. And the outcomes of the last meeting of the 5th session was the last meeting in Bonn, Germany on September of this year, was the agreement of a new global framework on chemicals, also known as the GFC, which is basically a roadmap or a blueprint to improve the life cycle of sound management. It's divided in 12 sections, which are also divided in 5 goals, and that include 28 targets, one of which was sponsored by youth and by our platform. Across, well, these goals imply the placement of legal and institutional landscapes and regulations, the availability and publishing of data and comprehensive data and knowledge, identifying and tackling issues of concern, finding and financing innovative solutions such as green and sustainable chemistry, and of course, means of implementation, which implies funding, strategic partnerships, and knowledge and technology transfer, among others. One of the other outcomes of this of ICCM 5 was the Bonn Declaration, or the high-level declaration on preventing exposure to harmful chemicals, phase out most harmful chemicals, and enhance safe management of chemicals. So it's basically a document that complements the new global framework on chemicals. They're like pretty much aligned. And along with these 2 documents, of course, was a global, well, a trust fund to finance the implementation and the programs under the new global framework on chemicals. And this finance will be, of course, coming from different sources, bilateral, multilateral, private, non-profit organization, as well as public. Next slide, please. So what we did there was we presented the Global Youth Declaration, which is something that we worked on by creating some regional and national meetings, for example. We also had a youth forum, which had a lot of success. During one day, we also had some interviews with different media and as well with the IASD colleagues, and we also have participation in some side events. So we were invited to participate in side events organized by other organizations. So here are some pictures as well. So we had, for example, one of our colleagues, Rachel Nestor, who was speaking during the high-level segment. We also had some coverage of our youth forum, and more specifically to the negotiations themselves. Well, as I said, we proposed one target, which ended up being target B7, and basically what we proposed was that stakeholders should make available, but also gather data disaggregated by age, gender, and regional, so that we can measure the impacts of chemicals are having on children and youth. We also sponsor one resolution, resolution B4, on how to mainstream gender across the instrument and how to empower all women and girls in chemical and waste management. And we also had some additions on text on youth, children, and other right holders. Next slide, please. That's another pictures of our delegation. We had also an intergenerational dialogue during our forum, which you can see in the lower part of this slide. And once again, our colleague Rachel speaking on the high-level segment. Next slide, please. Thank you. So now some updates on the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm conventions. Next slide, please. So a little bit of background now on the BRS conventions. So the Basel Convention was the first instrument from these three from these three conventions that came into place in 1989, but it didn't came into force until 1992. And it basically deals with the management, disposal, and transboundary movement of hazardous wastes and chemicals. And here, waste is the key word. Well, the list is too long, so I'm not going to go through it, but these substances can be categorized as being toxic, poisonous, explosive, corrosive, flammable, ecotoxic, and infectious. Some of the principles of the VRS Convention is the reduction and the management of hazardous chemicals. And in its original form, it didn't have a lot of faculties on restricting the movement on a lot of these substances until the Basel Ban Amendment came in the 90s, actually. And this amendment gives the convention the legal power to restrict the movement of some substances from countries of the European Union and countries that are member of the OECD to countries that are non-EU or non-OECD countries. So then see again. So on the Rotterdam Convention, the Rotterdam Convention does not cover waste itself. Basically, it doesn't cover materials that are being disposed, but supports countries in making informed decisions about importing chemicals produced specifically for trade. So basically, non-waste chemicals. I would say that's a key word here. So it's basically to manage the. And now moving to the Stockholm Convention. The Stockholm Convention targets specifically POPs, which are persistent organic pollutants, basically substances that remain in the environment and in soils, atmosphere, or water for long periods of time, and that they're also transmitted through the food chain, for example. And it's basically about the appropriate control of POPs, which are resist breakdown. That's what makes them so persistent. And these are usually found in pesticides, insecticides, industrial chemicals, as well as in some pharmaceutics. And the principle of this convention is to prevent the development of new POPs and replace existing ones. So as of 2013, they decided that these three COPs will be taking place back to back, so basically at the same time. So now they're also known as the VRS triple COPs or sister COPs. So that's a bit of background on these conventions and some updates. Well, for the Basel COP 16, some of the outcomes were on the prior informed consent. So basically, it's a mechanism by which exporting and importing countries need to agree on the substances that are going to be moved. And this update includes it puts plastics and electronic waste under to be subject of this convention of the prior informed consent. We also saw the agreement on some updated technical guidelines on the sound management of plastics, POPs, and again electronic waste, and the initiation of work to develop a new strategic framework for the next decade. On the Rotterdam Convention outcomes, Terbufos, which is a pesticide, was included on the list, so it's again subject for the prior informed consent. They also agreed on the intersectional work of the effect of listing substances. And they adopted a decision on procedures and mechanisms on compliance, which, no, sorry, I'm moving forward to the Stockholm Convention. So the Stockholm Convention COP11 outcomes, they agreed on the compliance after 18 years of work on this. They adopted decision on procedures and mechanisms on compliance, making a historical achievement, actually. So this will enable the establishment of a compliance committee to help parties to fulfill their own obligations. And during these COPs this year, the 2023, we saw for the first time a youth delegation taking place and participating during these events. We also had some proposals on children and youth action plans, and we participated and organized some side events, including next generation chemical action, educational tools to strengthen children and youth engagement in the VRS Convention. We also have an event on how youth, how's the participation in youth in the national implementation plans and strategies. And we also supported the VRS Secretariat in the launch of an educational game on schools called Next Exit, which I wasn't there personally, but I heard it's actually quite engaging and very fun to play. Next slide, please. And lastly, the Minamata Cup. Next slide, please. So just to keep it short, the Minamata Convention has the goal of protecting the human health and the environment from anthropogenic emissions and releases of mercury and mercury substances and compounds by provisions dealing with the life cycle of this specific substance. So as I said, some of these conventions target very specific substances. In this case, it's mercury. And the COP5, which took place a couple of months ago, took the decision on broadening participation of indigenous peoples and local communities in activities related to these programs, especially concerning artisanal and small-scale gold mining. They also took decisions on protecting and strengthening traditional livelihoods and cultural practices related, again, to small-scale gold mining. And they included some amendments on Annex A, which updates the phase-out dates of mercury-added products, such as batteries, switches, relays, cosmetic, and fluorescent lamps. Also some amendments to Annex B with a phase-out date for the production of polyurethane using mercury. And also agreement on advancing the phase-down of dental amalgams, which not all countries have done so far. And lastly, agreement, very important, is one of the highlights of this COP, was the agreement on the threshold for mercury contaminated wastes for export and import, which is set at a boundary of 50 milligrams per kilogram. So this was also a very famous outcome, given that they had been working on it for more than 5 years, 7 years actually. And youth engagement during this Minamata COP5 was the first youth delegation, once again in Minamata COP, and the beginning of collaboration with the Secretariat to increase youth engagement and responsiveness within this convention. So next slide, please. I think this is the last one, yeah. So some synergies with the Science Policy Panel and how to stay engaged. So we will be working with Horizon Scanning for emerging issues that will support the other multilateral environmental agreements, as well as the new global framework in maximizing their flexibility, relevance, and effectiveness. And one of the things that we have been advocating in all of these fora has been the willing of youth to engage also scientifically and technically. So we want to put science at the center of chemical policy making, especially under prioritized human health and environmental risk against the largely economic value chain considerations that have dominated conversations in the past. As Stanley presented, youth engagement has been very low compared to industry. So we want to advocate for a change on that. And lastly, increase global transparency and accessibility of scientific data on chemicals and waste. So if you want to stay engaged, you can join our WhatsApp. You can also join our mailing list, and you can join our membership by filling the form. And for doing these 3 things, you have the links here. I think this is the last slide. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ulysses and Stanley. Before we proceed with the rest of the agenda items, I would like to highlight something here related to what we are seeing, is that there are a lot of mentioning, if you notice, for first youth engagement in many different processes. And this shows the growing interests for the youth and also the platform that's being provided. So we have been hearing since the morning, this is the first in-person youth consultative meeting prior to the web process. And then we have been listening to the fact that also this is, we had the first youth delegation to Minamata Convention, to the BRS. We had the first youth forum to be organized with the ICCM. We had youth sponsored targets in the newly adopted global framework on chemicals. So we will also be listening later on after the lunch break from our colleagues here. Clarence is going to tell us more about the first youth delegation to Vienna Convention and Montreal Protocol for the first time ever on the 36 years of the convention. We had the first engagement for the UNEP nitrogen working group. So what I'm trying to say here is that congratulations for everyone interested in this process. And this come after dedication, work. People are starting to recognize the hard work that youth has been putting, but not only just to bridging the gap in terms of advocacy, but also in terms of providing something inputs to the table, proposing additional targets, proposing more inclusive focus related to our demands. So that was very crucial and important. Again, thank you everyone for your dedication. And as we can see, the growing interests in the coming in the existing process. So before we stop for the lunch, I have just a couple of points to highlight. We will stop here in the middle of the agenda item 3. After that, we will have the updates from UNEP Nitrogen Working Group, Vienna Convention, INC on plastic pollution, and the negotiation of the future plastic treaty. We will be gone for until 2 p.m. And then we will be right back with this update. We will have the discussion and consultations. And as I highlighted at the beginning, we will understand the differences between working documents, info documents, and how to read them, how to find them, so we will not be lost in the middle of the contact groups. Until 2 p.m. Nairobi time, we will have the both. After that, one last announcement is the intergenerational dialogue. I see 53 participants online. It would be very important to have your inputs in the discussion. We'll be honored to have the chair of the process, the principal coordinator of the secretariat of the WEG process, and other potential speaker to exchange in an intergenerational dialogue to see the perspective of the future youth engagement in the panels and other related points. So once again, thank you so much for making it till here. We will be right back after the lunch break in 45 minutes. Alrighty, that's it.
So I just want to add one thing. Yeah, we can see a lot of people joining online. It's such an encouragement for us. More than 53, and it's kind of rare in these days in online meeting when people are joining for a long time. So we really appreciate your effort. You really appreciate your inputs so far given on different documents of COMG submissions. So we'll request you to come back in 45 minutes. And because we are going to have a lot of informative discussion, especially Asil mentioned, how we can provide inputs to the negotiation starting from the 11th, and how you can be part of, the change and the agent, change maker in future, to be part of, maybe we can have a huge and meaningful youth engagement in the future panel. So yeah, let's be part of the history. Asil talked about a lot of first ever things. First ever youth engagement in Minamata, first ever youth in BRS, first ever youth engagement in Vienna and Montreal, first ever youth engagement in Nitrogen Working Group, and first ever youth forum on chemicals governance. Let's reconvene in 45 minutes. Thanks for your effort. We look forward to seeing you.